I'm Hannah, 32 years old, and if someone had told me that my marriage would drift into a blurry space between love and manipulation, I probably would have laughed. But now, 8 years after I met Aiden, the man I once believed was my soulmate, I'm not laughing anymore. Aiden and I met through mutual friends in a summer cooking class when I was 24. He was 6 years older than me, a civil engineer, calm, reserved, but strangely thoughtful. Aiden had a way of making you feel like the only person in a crowded room. We dated for 2 years before having a small beach wedding in Charleston, the place where he first held my hand under the sunset. The early years were relatively peaceful. Aiden was polite, considerate, and always remembered to bring flowers on every anniversary, no matter how small. We weren't a perfect couple, but I thought I was lucky. There was only one thing I could never fully feel at ease with: my mother-in-law, Lorraine. I'd never had problems with a partner's family before. I'm the kind of person who's easygoing, likes to maintain polite boundaries, and always tries to keep things smooth. I remembered birthdays, brought homemade pie to Thanksgiving, and even called Lorraine to ask what color flowers she liked so I could choose the right ones for the living room whenever she visited. But from the moment I met her, I knew I wasn't welcome. Lorraine looked me up and down, raised an eyebrow, and said something that made the whole room go still. "Oh, so you're Hannah?" Smaller than I expected. No smile, no hug, just a scrutinizing gaze and a sigh she didn't bother to hide. At first I thought she just needed time to warm up. I tried to get closer, invited her to lunch, asked her opinion on the family's traditional recipes. I thought sincerity would soften the distance between two women who loved the same man. But no, the more I tried, the more she pushed me away. Lorraine had this uncanny talent for turning compliments into knives. "Oh, you're not wearing makeup? Going natural is a bold choice." Or, when I wore a cream-colored dress to a Christmas party, she glanced at me and muttered, "That fabric wrinkles easily." I made that mistake too when I was young. Every visit with her felt like I had to take a deep breath. Aiden knew, but he always shrugged it off. "She's just blunt. Don't take it personally." I wanted to believe that she just needed time, that everyone has their quirks. But slowly I realized her coldness wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. Once, while I was preparing dinner for some friends, Lorraine showed up unannounced. She used the spare key Aiden had given her. I was in a long-sleeved t-shirt and sweatpants, hair still damp from a shower. She didn't say hello, just looked at me and said, "Oh, when I was your age I thought I could be pretty and domestic too. Then I grew up." I remember giving a half laugh, turning back to the kitchen like I hadn't heard her, but inside I froze. I felt small in my own kitchen. And the worst part? Aiden sat on the couch and didn't say a word. One thing I learned from those years: silence carries weight. And every time Aiden chose silence in the face of his mother's jabs, I felt myself slowly disappearing. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment was the first stone laid on the path to collapse. And I was about to hit the steepest part of that road. After that incident, I started noticing how often Lorraine showed up uninvited. At first it was on weekends, right when I was cleaning, hair a mess in an oversized shirt. Then it was during the week, at lunch breaks, just as I was putting a pot on the stove. It was like she had her own schedule for monitoring me. I just wasn't invited to participate. One time, I came home late from work, exhausted after a full day of meetings, and smelled meat pie. I hadn't cooked, and there she was, Lorraine, standing in my kitchen, wearing my apron, still holding a spoon, looking at me like I was the intruder. "You're working so late, I saw the fridge was empty, so I grabbed some groceries and cooked," she said casually, like it was the most normal thing. I had nothing to say but a dry thank you. That night I asked Aiden, "Did you know your mom was in our house this afternoon?" He shrugged. "She's just trying to help. You're too stressed." I wanted to say, "This isn't helping, this is violating," but I swallowed it down. I didn't want to argue, not after such a long day. Soon I started seeing signs of subtle, calculated interference. The boutique sofa I picked was replaced with a different set. Light gray, more neutral, according to Lorraine. Aiden said his mom just wanted to contribute a bit, and the new set was more comfortable. The oak dining table we chose when we first got married was replaced with a glass one, more modern. I was stunned to find out she didn't just have a key, she knew the Wi-Fi password, the garage code, even the safe combination, things I thought only Aiden and I knew. I asked him, looking straight into his eyes while flipping through the asset sheet. You gave your mom all our codes? He didn't deny it. Just in case, if there's an emergency. An emergency like switching our sofa? Or cooking in our kitchen? I asked, my voice sharp like a razor's edge. He sighed. You're overreacting. I started logging every time Lorraine showed up without notice, every change made without my consent, even the times I found her clothes in the laundry room. Once I found a box of chamomile tea placed neatly in the pantry, the only kind I was allergic to, and it had never been in our house before. I began to feel suffocated in my own space. Every corner felt like someone else's imprint. The living room was Lorraine's choice. The dining table was hers. Even the curtains were replaced with vintage brown ones she said added depth to the house. And me? I felt like a tenant in the home I once called my sanctuary. The worst part wasn't the control. It was that the man I loved didn't see it as a problem. I suggested to Aiden that we change the front door password. He looked at me like I had just proposed the most outrageous thing. Do you really want Mom to feel excluded? I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew even if I spoke, my words would vanish between the words mother and son. I tried to plan a getaway for just the two of us, a weekend trip to Asheville, a place I had dreamed of, sitting on a wooden porch, sipping hot cocoa and reading while listening to the forest wind. When I brought up the idea, Aiden seemed excited, but 2 days later he came back and said, Mom said that weekend won't work, she has a book club meeting and can't watch the cat. I stared at him. We've never asked her to cat sit. He shrugged. Just in case. I got it. Even subconsciously, Aiden had let his mom orchestrate the tiniest details of our life. Then one afternoon I came home earlier than usual, only to find my mother-in-law arranging flowers on our dining table, using the vase I had just bought the day before and hadn't even unwrapped. She smiled. I knew you wouldn't let the flowers sit in the box for long. I just helped you decorate a bit. I didn't respond. I walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and for the first time in 3 years of marriage, I cried. Not because of the unfairness. I cried because I had seen the future if I stayed silent. And I knew if I didn't act soon I would lose myself, little by little, in the very house I once called home. That night I remember every detail as if it happened just yesterday. Aiden came home early, carrying a bouquet of white lilies, the kind I mentioned liking during our first year of dating. He smiled softly, placed the flowers on the table, and said, I made a reservation at Maison Del Mar, remember, where we celebrated our first anniversary? Maison Del Mar is a French restaurant on the western hillside of the city, with a balcony overlooking the river and the sparkling lights of downtown. I used to love that place, not just for the molten chocolate dessert, but because it was where Aiden first held my hand under candlelight and whispered he wanted to be with me forever. So I wanted to believe he truly meant to make things right. Even though the cracks between us had deepened over time, I still chose to hold on to hope. It took me over an hour to get ready. Soft curls in my hair, natural but polished makeup, and the emerald dress Aiden once said made me look like spring had walked into the room. By the time we arrived, dusk had settled in. Maison Del Mar was still quiet and cozy, just like I remembered. Soft jazz played in the corner, couples whispered under warm golden lights. Aiden pulled out my chair, flashing that gentle smile I hadn't seen in so long. When our wine glasses were filled, he raised his, to what's behind us and what can be repaired. I nodded, a part of me wanting to believe, wanting to give this marriage another chance. But I had forgotten one important thing. In my marriage with Aiden, it was never just the two of us. We had just finished ordering when the restaurant door opened, and a sharp voice sliced through the warm air like a knife. So how long were you two planning to keep this from me? The entire room turned. I turned. There was Lorraine in a plum-colored wool coat, hair curled and perfectly styled, standing in the aisle like a stage star who'd lost her cue. Her face was furious, eyes locked on me. I froze. Aiden jumped up. Mom? You told me you were staying in tonight, something simple. I even brought over my lasagna to surprise you, and here you are, sneaking your wife to a special place like this. I've told you I wanted to try this restaurant. She marched over to our table, oversized handbag swinging with every step, a heavy cloud of perfume trailing behind. Before I could even process, she pointed directly at me. "And you, Hannah, don't you think a mother-in-law deserves to share in special moments too?" I turned to Aiden, hoping he'd stand up and say something, anything, to defend me. But no, he simply pulled out the chair next to him. "Have a seat, Mom. It's okay." I looked at that chair. The empty seat, meant for the healing we were trying to build, was now offered to his mother instead. I no longer heard the background music, no more flickering candlelight, everything faded in one breathless moment. I stood up, quietly without raising my voice, but inside everything collapsed. I looked Aiden straight in the eyes that once made me feel I could trust forever, and said, clearly and deliberately, "You two enjoy your dinner? I'm done, not just with this meal but with this marriage." The entire restaurant went still, no clinking of cutlery, no hushed side conversations, just chilling silence and the stunned stares of strangers. I walked away, heels clicking against the wooden floor, my hand gripping my clutch like I was holding on to the last shred of my self-respect. I didn't look back. Didn't need to see Aiden's stunned face or Lorraine's disbelieving eyes. I knew if I stood there one more second I would break. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face like a sobering slap. I called a ride, and as the car pulled away from Maison Del Mar, I didn't shed a single tear. Because I had already cried for all the silent years, all the sacrifices. Now there was only one thing in my mind: I wasn't going back, not ever. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I went to Kate's house, an old co-worker who once told me, "If you ever need a place to breathe, just knock." I knocked. She opened the door, didn't ask a thing, just pulled me into a tight hug. We sat on the couch, barely speaking, just a warm cup of tea and the kind of peaceful silence I had forgotten existed. The next morning I sent Aiden a text. "I'm okay, don't call, I need time." And then I began to prepare. Quietly, carefully, no anger, no drama, just the cold clarity of a woman too tired of being second in her own life. I opened a new bank account, cutting all ties to the joint one. I redirected my paycheck there, updated my info at work. Next, I contacted a lawyer, someone Kate recommended, a woman with calm eyes that seemed to see straight through you. She didn't ask why, just nodded when I said, "I'm leaving," and began drafting a list of things I'd need. I rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood in the northern part of the city where the maple trees blazed red in the fall and no one knew the name Lorraine Whitmore. A 3-month lease? Just enough for me to catch my breath. Each night when I returned home, the home still under both our names, I moved like a shadow. I didn't cook, didn't talk, didn't try. Aiden, strangely, acted as if that night at Maison Del Mar had been a minor misunderstanding. He still asked, "How was your day?" Still brought flowers, even ordered food from my favorite spot. I didn't respond, because deep down I knew those gestures weren't for me, they were for the comfort I used to provide, not for fear of losing me. One evening while Aiden was showering, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I hadn't planned to snoop, but the screen lit up and a message popped up clearly. "Mom, sent it, remember to delete the history." I hesitated, then opened the phone. In the messages was a history of bank transfers, regular payments from Aiden's account to another account under the name Lorraine Whitmore. The amounts weren't huge, $250, $430, $180, but they were monthly, as consistent as the moon. The notes said things like small shopping, mom needs medicine, A/C repair money. I had never heard of any of them, we had never discussed them, I had never agreed to them, and the strangest part, I managed most of our finances, but these? He had taken them from a separate account, from a credit card I didn't even know existed. I took screenshots, sent them straight to my lawyer. A week later, as I was packing a few personal items to bring to the new apartment, my lawyer called. Her voice was low and serious. "Hannah, I think you should sit down." She had discovered something I hadn't expected. I looked into some of the addresses connected to those transfers. It appears Lorraine no longer lives at the house you thought she did. She's moved into Unit 5A at the Summit, the same building you and Aiden live in. I was speechless. Aiden and I lived in apartment 7C. which meant Lorraine had been just 2 floors below me. For the past 6 months. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced through flashes of moments. The times I saw someone standing on the balcony below looking up. The anonymous gift bags left at the door. The eerie feeling of being watched whenever I entered or exited the building. Suddenly, everything made sense. I texted Aiden, "How long have you known your mom lives on the 5th floor?" Then, he didn't reply right away. Half an hour later he walked into the living room, eyes avoiding mine. "I was gonna tell you, she just wanted to live closer, it's no big deal." I said nothing. I just handed him the screenshot of the bank transactions, along with the apartment address. "You've been sending her money every month, hid the fact that she's been living right beneath us for half a year, and now you say it's no big deal?" He stayed silent. I saw regret, but not for what he'd done, only for being caught. I stood up, grabbed my bag. Before I walked out the door, I turned around and, for the first time, said clearly, "From this moment on, I'm no longer part of the we you and your mother created." I walked away, never looked back. Because I knew in that very second I had chosen myself. And I would never return to a home where my heart had been locked out. 3 days after I officially moved into my new apartment, Aiden sent a short, cold, emotionless email. "We need to meet to discuss the assets, especially the apartment. My mom will be present, just to make things clear." I forwarded the email to my lawyer. She replied with just 2 words. "Be careful." The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon in a small law office downtown. Not mine, but one Aiden's side had chosen. I arrived with my lawyer, dressed professionally, carrying a thick folder of documents I'd been organizing for weeks. Aiden was already there, along with Lorraine and a silver-haired man with gold-rimmed glasses who introduced himself as the Whitmore family legal advisor. I didn't nod. I didn't shake hands. I just sat down, eyes steady. Aiden slid a file across the table. "These are the ownership transfer papers. Since you've moved out, this will make everything cleaner. My mom contributed a large portion of the down payment, so we believe it's best if she holds full ownership." I opened the file. The first line read quitclaim deed. Grantor Hannah Whitmore, grantee Lorraine Whitmore. I said nothing. I gently placed it back on the table, then pulled out a different file from my bag. I slid it across to them. My lawyer spoke up, voice sharp. "These are the original wire transfer statements, showing the funds Ms. Hannah paid toward the apartment, including the down payment, which accounts for 82% of the total purchase price. Here is the credit agreement in her name alone, and here is the original purchase contract, in which Lorraine's name does not appear until the final notarization." The mood in the room shifted. Aiden looked as if the blood had drained from his face. Lorraine still sat upright, but her fingers clenched her handbag strap. I looked at Aiden, calm. "You added your mother's name to the property without telling me. Since when did your wife become a stranger in her own home?" He stammered. "At the time, we just thought it would help us get a better loan if Mom was on the title too." I cut him off. "Be honest. This was the plan from the start, wasn't it? All her input, her decisions, her demands to change the furniture, that was her way of claiming the place as hers." My lawyer continued. "We also looked into the real estate office that processed the transaction. The agent was a longtime friend of Ms. Lorraine. According to internal records, Lorraine was listed as a silent investor and was added to the title within 3 days before final notarization." The Whitmore advisor clearly started to look uneasy. He asked for a 5-minute break. They stepped out of the conference room, leaving me and my lawyer waiting. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth was speaking for itself. When they returned, Lorraine's face had lost its composure. She spoke bluntly, no longer hiding anything. "I just wanted to make sure Aiden had somewhere to live if you two split up. He's my son. You didn't think I'd let him lose everything, did you?" I looked at her. Longer than necessary. Then I smiled faintly. "And you thought I'd let myself lose everything?" Aiden leaned forward, his voice softer. "I don't want this to turn ugly. If you sign, we can settle this peacefully. Mom's willing to buy out your share at a fair price." I cut him off. "Why didn't you make that offer before trying to trick me with an illegal transfer?" My lawyer closed the file and stood. "We'll be filing with the court to freeze the property's title until the dispute is resolved. And be advised, if Ms. Lorraine engages in any further attempts to manipulate assets, we will pursue charges for real estate fraud." The meeting ended with no handshakes, no smiles, only the sound of my heels echoing down the long hallway as I left the building. Outside, the wind was strong, but I felt lighter than ever. That night I sat in my new apartment, smaller, humbler, but mine. No heavy perfume, no passive-aggressive comments, no eyes watching from below. I brewed a cup of peppermint tea, opened my laptop and wrote a line in my digital journal. When they try to steal what's yours, make sure they never see it coming. You hold all the cards. I thought that after such a tense meeting, Lorraine and Aiden would lay low and regroup. But I underestimated her recklessness and her insatiable greed. About 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday morning, I got a message from Eliza, my friend and neighbor from the old apartment. Attached was a photo taken from the hallway on the 7th floor, right outside where I used to live. "What's going on, Hannah? Did you really move out? They've put up a for sale sign right outside your old door." I zoomed in on the photo. Sure enough, a large sign read "For sale, open house this weekend," with a bold phone number listed underneath. That number. I recognized it. It was Lorraine's. I felt my blood pressure surge. 10 minutes later, I was in my lawyer's office, placing my phone on her desk, my voice calm but firm. "She's putting the apartment up for sale, and I'm still on the title." My lawyer frowned, typed a few lines into her computer. Within 3 minutes, she found the online listing. On a real estate site, the apartment's photos were posted along with a caption: "Spacious unit, elegant design, longtime investor owner seeks quick sale." The contact name listed was Lorraine Whitmore, no mention of me. "This is property fraud," my lawyer said, her tone sharp. "We'll file an emergency injunction with the court to halt the transfer and report it to the real estate board." Less than 48 hours later, a freeze order was approved. All sale activity related to the apartment had to stop immediately. But that was just the beginning. The real estate agent handling the sale, a man named Kyle, was summoned for questioning. According to him, Lorraine claimed full ownership after an impending divorce settlement. She even sent him a fake contract bearing a signature with my name. The problem was I had never signed any such document. My lawyers submitted a request for signature verification and filed formal charges for document forgery and property fraud with federal investigators. Lorraine was no longer just dealing with me, she was now facing the legal system she had ignored for far too long. That evening I got a text from an unknown number. "You're taking this too far. Families shouldn't drag each other into court." I didn't have to guess, I knew exactly who sent it. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a screenshot and forwarded it to my lawyer's case file. A week later, I discovered something that shocked me even more. During the investigation, the law office uncovered that Lorraine had pulled a similar stunt 3 years ago in another housing development, again under the title of silent investor. She had been co-listed with the daughter of an old friend, then forged documents to claim full ownership after the woman's divorce. That case never came to light because the victim couldn't afford to sue. But this time was different. The evidence was undeniable. The signature samples, the contract templates, even the same real estate agent. I sat quietly in the office, watching my lawyer flip through page after page. And suddenly, I felt a chill. Not out of fear, but from realizing something deeper. She didn't just want the apartment. She had done this before. And I was just the latest chapter in her long-running scheme. That night I sent Aiden an email. Subject: what you need to know. I attached all the documents, the fraudulent listing, the forged contract with the fake signature, and the buried case from 3 years ago. I ended with one single line. "You can keep standing by her, but from now on, I won't be holding back." Not long after, I received a court update. Lorraine was officially under investigation for falsifying property ownership documents. A subpoena was issued and she was ordered not to approach the old apartment or contact me in any form. I sat in my small kitchen sipping tea, watching the morning light spill through the window. The sky was unremarkable, but I knew beyond those calm clouds a storm was brewing. And this time it wasn't coming for me. One late afternoon in late fall, when the maple trees had turned golden and the air was beginning to chill, I received an email from Aiden. This time, it wasn't to justify or beg. It was a short invitation. "Mom wants to invite you to dinner. She says she wants to resolve everything peacefully. You don't have to come, but if you can, please do, one last time." I stared at the screen for a long while, my heart oddly still. I should have deleted the message and continued with my new life. A life without Lorraine's shadow, without Aiden's lies. But then I realized I needed to hear them say it, needed to see them face the undeniable truth they had been avoiding. And more than anything, I needed to end this. Not with tears, but with truth. I replied, "I'll come, but only to close this chapter." Friday evening, I arrived at the 5th-floor apartment where Lorraine now lived. The place looked like a cheap imitation of a model home, trying too hard to appear upscale but lacking warmth. The smell of stew lingered in the air, a scent I used to find comforting, but now only made me want to turn around and leave. Lorraine opened the door, lips painted in a bold red, a forced smile on her face. "Oh, Hannah, you finally decided to come." I didn't shake hands. Didn't smile. I gave a small nod and stepped inside. Aiden was already seated at the dining table, looking more worn down than I remembered. His eyes avoided mine, as if he didn't even know what he was doing there. We sat down at the table, the air thick with awkward silence. Dinner began with small talk about how this winter's colder than last and young families moving into the neighborhood. I let them talk, let them perform. Then I set my spoon down and looked directly at Lorraine. "We're not here to talk about the weather. I came because Aiden said you wanted to resolve things peacefully, so I'm listening." Lorraine set her fork down, leaned back in her chair, and smiled coolly. "Anna, you're making a big deal out of this. I was just trying to protect my son. That's what family does. You'd understand if you had a son of your own." I gave a cold smile. Protect? By forging my signature? By putting up for sale property I still legally own? Or by invading my personal life for 6 years straight? She folded her arms. "You should be grateful I helped you and Aiden buy that apartment. Without my name on the paperwork, you two wouldn't have qualified for the loan." I pulled a folder from my bag, placed it gently on the table, and opened it. Clear, stamped and itemized documents, transfer receipts, bank statements, original contracts, all showing the money I had paid toward the apartment. 87% of the total cost. This is the truth, not speculation, not hearsay, evidence. I paid for nearly the entire apartment and you were only added because Aiden secretly included your name behind my back. The room froze. Aiden lowered his head, his face flushed red. But Lorraine didn't back down. "Doesn't matter, I have rights. I invested, I have rights." A voice spoke from behind me, cutting her off. "But you used money that didn't belong to you, Lorraine." I turned around. It was Carol, Lorraine's late husband's sister. I'd never met her before, but my lawyer had mentioned her while investigating the Whitmore family trust. Carol stepped into the room, holding a copy of some documents. "Hannah's attorney contacted me, and when I checked the trust records, I found this. The money you invested actually came from my brother's trust fund, intended for his future grandchildren. You had no right to withdraw it. You forged the authorization signature to move the funds into your personal account." The room fell into a terrifying silence. Lorraine was speechless. Aiden sat frozen, lips barely moving. "Is that true, Mom?" Carol continued, not angry, just deeply disappointed. "I've stayed quiet too long, but this time you crossed the line. I'll provide all documentation to the investigators, and if necessary, I'll testify in court." I stood up, took back my file, and looked at the two of them one last time. "I didn't come here for apologies or forgiveness. I came so you'd understand I'm not the naive woman you once manipulated, and this time, I'm not backing down." Before I walked out the door, I added one final sentence, not loud, not threatening. "You can keep your lies, but you won't keep that apartment. Or anything that belongs to me." I closed the door behind me, and for the first time in years I heard the sound of my footsteps echo confidently down the hallway, like a drumbeat marking the start of a brand new chapter. After Aunt Carol left the apartment, exposing the cold truth on that lifeless dinner table, I stood up without waiting for another word from Aiden or Lorraine. She was still sitting there, frozen like stone, her eyes wide in shock, staring at the stack of files and the accusation from her own sister-in-law. As for Aiden, he sat with his head down, unable to speak, too ashamed to even look at me. I walked out the door without anger, without regret, just one single feeling: relief. The weight had been lifted, the truth laid bare. There was nothing left for me in that place. The very next morning, my lawyer and I officially filed for divorce, along with a request to freeze the property title to prevent any unauthorized transfers by Aiden or Lorraine. The court granted the order in less than 72 hours. My lawyer also submitted a report to the real estate fraud unit about the misuse of trust funds. All accounts connected to Lorraine were temporarily frozen pending a financial investigation. Aunt Carol, as co-trustee of the Whitmore Family Trust, agreed to cooperate fully and provide all necessary documentation. She also said something I'll never forget. "You're the first one who stood up to her without fear, and you did the right thing." A few days later, I got an unexpected call from Eliza, my friend who still lived in the old building. Her voice was frantic. "Hannah, you won't believe this. Lorraine just screamed at Aiden in the lobby in broad daylight, yelled that it was all his fault, that if he hadn't been stupid enough to bring that girl into their lives, everything would have been fine." I sighed. "Did you see her hit him?" "Yes, a full-on slap, right in front of the security guard." I paused for a few seconds, then said, "You know what to do," and Eliza did. The whole incident was captured on the building's security cameras and sent directly to my lawyer. Finally, nearly 2 months after that fateful night, I officially signed the divorce papers. No drama, no tears, just a signature, a stamp, and a door quietly closing. My new apartment isn't big, just a cozy 2-bedroom in Maple Hill, far from the luxury high-rise I once shared with Aiden. There are no shiny elevators or carpeted hallways here, but there are chestnut trees casting shade every afternoon, neighbors who smile when I pass by, and most importantly, peace. Each morning I make a cup of coffee, open the window to let the autumn breeze flow in, and feel my heart relearning how to beat freely. I've arranged everything myself: the indigo rug I once loved but was never allowed to place, the floral curtains I bought but Lorraine dismissed as too busy. Every detail is my choice, untouched by anyone else's hand. No one tells me what I should or shouldn't do. I've started writing again, something I gave up during my marriage. The first few drafts were raw, painful, honest. I sent a short piece to a local magazine, and not long after they responded, they wanted to publish it. For the first time in years, I felt alive, not just surviving. One late afternoon, sitting on the balcony as golden light streamed through the leaves, I received one final message from Aiden. "I know I let Mom ruin everything, but I still love you, and I don't know how to live without you." I read it, then deleted it. No reply. Because I've learned one thing: love that doesn't stand up for you isn't love at all. I used to wait for Aiden to take my side. I hoped he'd be the wall between me and his mother's suffocating control. But he never stood up. He only stepped back, stayed silent, and left me to carry the weight of our marriage alone. Now I don't need anyone to stand behind me, because I've learned to stand on my own, and stand strong. If you're in a relationship where you constantly have to shrink yourself, where you have to ask permission just to exist, remember this: you deserve more, and if the person you love doesn't have the courage to protect you, you have every right to walk away. To protect yourself. Looking back, I no longer see myself as a victim. I'm the woman who walked away from a loveless marriage, who said no to hidden control and sweetened lies. I used to be afraid of being alone, but I've learned that peaceful solitude is far better than living beside someone who isn't real. Now I live a small life, but it's mine. And it's the freest I've ever been. What do you think of Hannah's decision? Would you have done something differently in her place? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more real and emotional family stories.